History is shaped by those who record it, and films, both contemporary and historical, have a multitude of ways in which they do so. Film can be an avenue to glorify or vilify whatever time is being shown, and which end of the spectrum a film falls on depends on the use of cinematic elements. The films American Beauty and Selma choose how to represent themselves in either a contemporary or historical context based on their use of acting, dialogue, and slow motion. Both dialogue and the acting which goes along with it are essential indicators of the importance of whatever is being said. This is especially true of the references that movies decide to make within themselves. In the film American Beauty, the camera focuses in on Angela and Jane, who fulfill the bad girl stereotypes in the form of the cheerleader and the goth or proto-goth, which are reinforced by the fact that they're smoking cigarettes. It is clear that the girls Angela is regaling with her tales of sleeping with photographers are disgusted by their facial expressions and then reinforced by the words that are slung at Angela.
Like your goddamn Chrissy Turlington.
The way that these words are said with such vehemence implies that Christy Turlington was a big-time model, but this is a rather throwaway reference. Someone who is not familiar with modeling or the culture of the 1990s would have to Google the name in order to understand the reference.
Contrast this with the film Selma, where the comparable contemporary reference made is to Mahalia Jackson, whose name is more familiar to the general population and whose presence makes sense in the movie's wider scope. Mahalia Jackson is known as a musician and an activist rather than just a model. In addition to being a factual part of the story, this weighted reference adds dimensions to both King and Jackson as characters and as real people.
Slow motion is a film technique used to hold the viewer's attention on an element, and it can be used for a number of reasons. The kind of slow motion used in the scene where Lester is revealed to be dead is a less formal kind of slow motion, but is still present. There is a slow reveal of Lester's body, and then Ricky's gradual lowering to look into the dead man's eyes. These moments of lingering on Lester's dead face show a certain amount of glorification of his murder. This lingering contributes to Ricky's character, showing him looking intently at a dead human being and actually smiling at it, but it also brings the audience around to possibly seeing the same beauty in death as Ricky sees.
Rather than being used just for beauty, the slow motion utilized in Selma's church bombing is powerful and dramatic. Once again, the moment is stretched out, placing the audience in the moment and allowing them to absorb the sheer horror. This kind of slow motion feels akin to something out of a war movie, where there is only destruction in a place that showed life just moments ago. The stark contrast between the slow motion and the quick ways in which now dead children were talking only moments ago startles the audience and immerses them in this painfully drawn-out scene.
Oppression is a common theme in both American Beauty and Selma, though they are shown in varying ways because they play varying roles in their respective films. As a film of the 1990s, American Beauty would want you to see the oppression of homosexuals as a non-issue. Lester has no qualms about his neighbors Jim and Jim, introducing them in the opening monologue and then gladly asking them for their help when he wants to get in shape. Colonel Frank Fitz is a character seen as an outsider moving into this community, and because of this, his hatred of Jim and Jim makes him seem to be the minority. He acts so aggressively towards them, when they're not there of course, because he is actually angry about their existence. They show a life that Frank might have had if he'd confronted his own shameful feeling desires, which are only expressed at his weakest and most vulnerable moment. On the whole, American Beauty's treatment of marginalized groups is meant to make the audience feel better, more aligned with Lester than with Frank on their views.
Selma, on the other hand, is a movie about oppression and how it was legitimized in the entire culture. One primary example of the struggle African Americans faced is shown during the voter registration scene. This scene displays the injustice of the voting system at the time. Even though the written rules allowed black citizens to vote, the officers who held registration were all white and often corrupt, finding ways to twist the system and restrict black people from having basic rights because of their racist motives.
Many county judges in Alabama.
67.
The contempt that is shown for Oprah's character in this scene comes not just through her questioning, but the facial expressions and aggressive posture of the man who is keeping her from registering. Another example of widespread oppression is given when Martin Luther King is talking to the president at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson. King requests that action be taken to resolve the conflict of black citizens not being able to vote, particularly in the South. A common response for white people in power during the 1960s, including Johnson, was to simply avoid people speaking up on injustices. This is exemplified when Lyndon B. Johnson tells King that poverty is the main issue at the time, not voting rights for African Americans. This message is to show the flaws of the justice system in America during the 1960s. By seeing these historical flaws, we are able to compare their society to our modern-day one and think about how we have developed, and also what we must keep developing. Because of its distance from the subject matter, the film has no inclination to soothe the conscience of the audience or to hide the oppression that clearly exists in the film's context, as well as in the minds of the audience themselves.